Hi, everybody. Today I am speaking with Sam Levac-Levey. Let me try one more time. Levac-Levey. All right. Hi, everybody. Today I am here with Sam Levac-Levey, who is the
Love that love, actually. No, I'm just kidding.
Are you serious?
Sorry.
All right.
I just
Your
have
name
to.
is,
I'm
it is what it is. Whatever I
sorry.
said.
All right.
All right. So I'm here with Sam, and he it kindly offered to talk to me about his latest game called Solutions, and it is a game about climate change. And I'm just going to read the little teaser that I stole off of your Kickstarter. It says you and your friends must work together to reduce global emissions before it's too late. As you strategically deploy climate solutions, you need to think critically and discuss with your teammates to avoid climate catastrophe. Whoa. But watch out for dangerous feedback loops and global climate events. Will your team save the planet, or will you break the thermometer as global temperatures soar? So that is a very exciting game. That sounds exciting to me. So, what are the mechanics in your game?
Yeah, so it's actually a very non-traditional game, I'd say. It's very discussion-based, kind of similar in a way to like Cards Against Humanity or Super
Okay.
Fight, if you've played that. Really, one thing I'll say is when I told my friend I was going to make this game, he immediately said, "Go buy Terraforming Mars because that could be a great source of inspiration." I'm assuming you've played
Yeah, I
Terraforming.
have.
Amazing game. When rushed right out and bought a few other games as well as inspiration. And so I'll say that I really enjoyed Terraforming Mars and had a phenomenal time with it. And one of the my favorite parts of Terraforming Mars is how they have these incredible, really magical cards, and they have like you're like hurtling asteroids into the atmosphere to warm it up, right? Or you have like electro catapults that are like shooting things from one place to another.
Mm.
One thing I found was the magic of the cards didn't actually matter to the gameplay itself. And like, well, when we were playing, I'd want to be like, "Oh, stop! Read out that card. That's so cool." But all that really mattered was like, "Oh, this card says +1 this and -2 this."
Right.
Um, and so the magic of the cards didn't matter to the gameplay itself. And so, as much as I love Terraforming Mars, that was like kind of the opposite intention I had with Solutions. And really, my intention was to like, if you're going to play one of these magical climate solutions, you're going to need to actively engage with it and like think critically about it. And so, very discussion based, and there's kind of a ranking mechanism in the game that's based on some of the cutting edge research in climate. And so you're basically having these live debates about these climate solutions, and then kind of seeing how well you do match up to the research.
Okay. That is so cool. I didn't realize that Terraforming Mars was kind of like a spark of inspiration for
Yeah,
you. But I can kind of see that because Terraforming Mars is all about like making that planet livable.
yeah,
And
you
in,
are
yeah,
causing climate change on
yeah,
Mars.
I totally get it. So
Yeah,
now I kind of would like to, I was very interested in your background because you say that you're a mechanical engineer with a background in aerospace and renewable energy. So I'm just picturing you in a room full of very smart people having these conversations all the time. Is that true? Are you
um,
always like, no, it's better to save water. No, it's better to save the trees.
I've had a lot of fun hot tub discussions about these things.
Interesting. I saw some clips from your Kickstarter where you had a whole panel of people discussing. It looked like you were all discussing probably climate solutions. What was that like? Like, who did you go to? Were they teachers that you knew or coworkers? Like, I'm just curious who was behind the science fact checking and all the research behind solutions.
Yeah, so a lot of the initial inspiration, and actually really the initial spark for the game, was a book called Drawdown. Drawdown is this incredible organization. They came about in about 2013 or 2014, and they realized that at the time there was a ton of really great science being done about climate and like all the problems and the ice sheets are melting, polar bears are dying, but there wasn't a lot of rigorous science being done at the time about the solutions and what we can do about it. And there was some focus on some of the solutions, such as like electric transportation. What they did is they took a team of over 200 experts and they analyzed all the climate solutions that they could come across. And they ended up writing this book about it. And I have it behind me somewhere. Here you go.
Perfect.
Yeah. So basically, it's just a giant compilation of all these climate solutions, and I would just flip through the book and kind of think, well, how can I fit into this solution? How can I fit into this one? And it was really full of just these really kind of unique and surprising solutions that most people just don't think of. And a lot of these surprising solutions often also had really surprising impacts. So, for example, refrigerant management, which no one thinks about as a climate solution, but in reality, refrigerants are up to 9,000 times worse than CO2. And in that original book, Drawdown actually ranked it as the #1 most impactful solution that could be done to solve climate change. No one thinks that. In your refrigerator or your air conditioner, there's a liquid called, or it switches between a liquid and a gas, and it's called a refrigerant. And the refrigerants have very specific properties to be able to absorb heat and then be able to so that you can then transfer it away.
Okay.
And those gases, they're really, really good at that job. But when they leak to the atmosphere, so the most common greenhouse gas that causes global warming is CO2, carbon dioxide. But these refrigerants can be 2,000 to 9,000 times worse than CO2.
Wow. So you're saying that like the refrigerants are actually worse for the environment than the carbon dioxide?
On a per kilogram basis. So we care about CO2 because there's way more CO2 than refrigerants, right?
Right.
So refrigerants, percentage-wise, in terms of like the gases going up into the atmosphere, it's a very small percentage, but it's a very powerful small percentage. And so if you can make a change in that percentage and do something about it, you're having a really high impact with a lot less effort, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah. And so for the refrigerants, a lot of people have heard about like the hole in the ozone layer, for example.
Yeah.
And so that was using refrigerants called CFCs. And there was the Montreal Protocol that actually banned those and was really, really successful and was one of the pinnacle moments of like climate action actually working. But we replaced the CFCs with HFCs, and the HFCs don't put the hole in the ozone layer, but they're still up to 9,000 times worse for the climate.
Wow.
So now the movement is to try and ban those and find alternatives, and there are alternatives, but yeah, basically you can think of not just the refrigerators and the air conditioners in your home, but also in all the industrial warehouses that like keep food cold and frozen. And also if you think about places like India and China, where the people are getting more and more money and can start to afford air conditioning, and they need air conditioning to survive. Like that's like, especially like a basic human right for them almost. So like we need to increase refrigerants like for them. So how can we do that in a sustainable way?
So in your game, like for example, the role of the refrigerants, would that be like something that you would present as something that we need to focus more on? So would that be kind of a more higher scoring card or a lower scoring card? Like how does it fit into the concept of the game?
Yeah, so we've kept the game really as simple as possible, and really there's, I'd say, 3 main focuses to the game, which are really in the subtitles. The subtitle is Discover, Prioritize, and take action. And
Okay.
so the first purpose of the game is, all right, first let's help people discover all these unique and surprising solutions that they've never heard of. Then number two is prioritize, and what I mean by that is like really getting people to think critically about the solutions, engage with them, and then number three is take action, which obviously while you're playing the game, you're trying to take action and like beat the game, save the world, but also the goal is to use the game as a starting point for real world climate action, which that's a whole other story, and I can talk about it later. But so to your question, um, we've tried to keep the way the solutions fit in as simple as possible, and so they are very kind of like one dimensionally ranked in terms of how much CO2 equivalent gases that they can reduce from the atmosphere. So when I say CO2 equivalent, so there's a bunch of different gases going into our atmosphere right now. The most prominent one is CO2, but there's a bunch of others that like we put less of them in the atmosphere, but they can be a lot worse. So like methane, for example, can be like about 34 times worse over 100 years, or the refrigerants. So like basically in the game, the research we based the game on kind of like combined, like they drew equivalencies like between the methane and the CO2 and came
Okay.
up with a simple number to compare them on.
Okay. Very interesting. Now, I wanted to talk about the creation of your game. And some of the things that you highlight, because you did want to make it in a sustainable way, or in a way that is as sustainable as possible. So I'm just wondering, what were some of the things that you were able, like, what were some of the solutions for making a sustainable game?
Definitely. So we kind of went about this two, maybe I guess four different ways.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I'll go through them and we'll see if I actually counted that up right.
Okay.
But first of all, with the design of the actual game, just tried to be extremely efficient with the components. Like you said, I'm a mechanical engineer, so I'm very focused on making things as efficient as possible. So
That's great.
we actually sized the game box to fit exactly in a USPS small flat rate box. So basically, it goes right into this really small box for shipping with like no extra wasted padding or whatever, and it also coincidentally makes it a lot cheaper for shipping as well, which
Okay.
is great.
So does it come in a board game box, or does
Yeah,
it just come? Okay, so the board game
yeah,
box. There we go. I was like,
like,
at first I was like, oh, does it not come with a box and it just comes
no,
in?
no, no,
Okay.
no.
So I'm like,
We,
that is very interesting.
no, I think the
I
box is
got you.
important for retail
No,
and
but that
stuff
was
like.
very clever to design it from the very start with size in mind. So
Yes,
that's
we
great.
actually have pictures on our website where we show like because a lot of games. So one of the problems is that there can be a price perception based on the size of the box, and so
Yes.
what a lot of publishers do is they put games in a bigger box, even if they could fit in a smaller box. And we actually have some comparisons on our website where we show like games like three times the box size that like fit in our box, and
Right.
they put like these cardboard inserts that like
Yeah.
fill up the room basically, and so we definitely stayed away from that. And yes, we also tried to stay very much away from as much plastic as possible, because obviously plastic has some terrible ecological effects, and on the climate side, producing plastic can produce a lot of methane as well, which isn't great. So we do have shrink wrap just because it's as like our number one priority is that the games don't get spoiled
Yes.
from moisture or from damage.
I just did a video about shrink wrap, and it's such a interesting conundrum. So I totally understand. I was curious how you address it. It seems like anyone who's working in sustainability and board gaming, that's like the puzzle to
Yeah,
figure out.
yeah,
So
yeah.
you decided to go with the shrink wrap to ensure the quality and that things aren't being returned damaged.
Yeah, so if you basically look at it, like it would be ideal not to use shrink wrap,
Right.
but at the same time, like the shrink wrap, it's like the thinnest little wisp of plastic. So it's like it would be better not to have it. But like compared to having a batch of damaged board games that you then have to like throw out and remanufacture, like
Yeah. I did
go.
notice that your role game book, like you chose to do that kind of in a unique way.
Yeah, so the rule book is fully digital, and that's something honestly a bit controversial. And we are actually gonna send out possibly a poll about that during our Kickstarter. I'm not sure yet because we have heard mixed feelings about that.
Okay.
What do you think about it?
Well, I personally, I am dyslexic, so I'm a very slow reader, and reading
Right,
online is extremely distracting for me. So
right,
if I have something in hand that is really beneficial to me, I might
yeah,
figure out a way to like copy the text and print it out.
right. Well, would you prefer that, like just having a digital rule book, but you have the option to print it out, or would you rather just let's just put it in the box?
I don't know. I feel that if you could, have a rule book in the box, that is ultimately what I would prefer.
Right.
And but then like I would hope that it would be like FFC
Sure,
certified or something of that nature.
sure. Noted.
And the price goes up. But I appreciate. I thought it was very innovative. I
Yeah,
thought it was a good idea. So I'm glad you put it out there. So you've heard some people didn't like that, I guess.
yeah. Even from like really hardcore climate people, some of them were like, "Oh, this is like meaningless savings. Like, come on."
Oh, okay.
So we're offsetting 100% of our emissions using our partner cooler.
I did
Like,
notice that. Yeah, and I had some questions about that because I don't understand at all how it works. So I was hoping you could explain a little bit more about that. You say how you're going to be buying permits.
yeah.
Where are the permits being issued from?
So let's start with carbon offsets. Have you heard of like normal carbon offsetting?
Yes.
For anyone who hasn't, really carbon offsetting is the idea that, all right, we're going to do our best to make our product as sustainable as possible, but it's obviously impossible to be like 100% sustainable. There's always emissions associated with everything. So what we're going to do until we can like source 100% of everything from like the most renewable energy, we are going to pay for a project that will remove carbon from the atmosphere and will kind of offset the emissions that are left over. So let's say
Okay.
for our board game, Coolers calculated that, and they've way over calculated this, by the
Okay.
way. And I can explain why in a second.
Sure.
But they've calculated that our game produces at most 14 kilograms of CO2 to be manufactured and transported to your home. Basically, what we're saying is, all right, well, we have up to 14 kilograms of CO2 that like we weren't able to reduce. So we are going to pay for something else that will reduce that 14 kilograms. And the most common way to do this is by planting trees.
Hmm.
And so you can plant trees, and when you plant trees, as the trees grow, they absorb carbon dioxide, and so you're like, yay! Now we've like absolved our
You offset
responsibility.
it.
Yeah, you offset. And so I think that's a practice that's becoming more and more common and known about. I think like some airlines do it, like buy a plane ticket, offset the emissions. The thing is that there's a few problems with carbon offsets as they are. Well, one problem is permanence. So if you look at trees, trees are great, and like we should definitely plant more trees. And I'm not anti-tree in any way, but trees are a terrible carbon offset because trees can burn, or they can get infested with beetles, or they can get cut down, and the offset that you think you got just got re-released back into the atmosphere.
Yeah.
And so, like, absolutely, we need to plant more trees, but it's not a good way to say, oh, we have actually eliminated.
Yeah.
If you look at, for example, like, oh, I'm in Canada, and our forests actually emit more carbon than they absorb on average,
Really?
and yeah, and that's because of like a mix of things from like forest fires to like beetle infestations that rot the trees to logging to whatever. But yeah, so and there's other types of carbon offsets other than trees. Some are better than others. Some are more permanent than others. But then another problem that often comes up is verification. So, all right, you claimed that you planted these trees or did this other project, but did it really happen? What's your like certification process? And like so sometimes that stuff is just like hard to check.
Right.
And so what Cooler does is they actually do what they call neutralizing the carbon rather than offsetting. And basically, there's several regions in the U.S. and in other places, but right now they're buying credits called RGGI permits. I think it's a collection of states. Oh, we can put a link in the show notes.
Okay. Yeah.
But basically, these are highly regulated markets where the states have come together and said, we are going to limit pollution this year to X amount of pollution, and no one can pollute any more than that. And companies need to buy pollution permits to be able to allow to pollute up to that limit. And so that's including like coal power plants, like manufacturing plants. And so basically what Cooler is doing is the money we pay them, they directly buy these permits so that the coal plants can't use them and are actually forced to shut down early.
Oh.
It also like spurs a bunch of other innovation because then that money gets recycled into renewable energy projects
Okay.
and
Now,
stuff like.
did you say you're from Canada? So this is a
Yes.
Canadian. Okay.
These credits are being bought in the U.S. So the
Oh.
RG system, I can look it up quickly to see which states it's in.
Okay. I'm just like this boggles my mind. Like how is it regulated? Like if there's no more permits but there's still pollution going out, how is it enforced? I guess.
My understanding is these companies or power plants like actually literally have to shut down, and
Oh. Okay. Well, if they say that, then
yeah,
that's pretty good.
they have a very different way of calculating the emissions of the game. So
Okay.
Cooler is actually doing a kind of a top-down approach based on all the known inputs to any category.
Okay.
So they've basically it's not like the most custom analysis, but they've kind of like found the like worst case for like games in general,
Hmm.
and that's their kind of like baseline for the breakdown.
Hmm.
And as it turns out, different products in different categories tend to have really similar footprints in terms of carbon. That's honestly true whether you're doing FSC or sustainable manufacturing or not. They've looked at what's called scope 1 emissions, scope 2 emissions, and scope 3 emissions. And the scope 3 is what's really rare.
Hmm.
Uh, and so basically, scope 1 emissions are like your direct emissions that like you can exactly control. So like for example, with the manufacturer, it would be like is like what like how much CO2 is coming from their factory, et cetera, et cetera. Then scope 2 is like the indirect emissions, so like maybe the electricity that they purchase and like what's going on there. But then scope 3 is way harder and much rarer, and that's really looking into like every single other aspect, like from the metal that like went into the machines
Wow.
that like, manufactured the game, and like literally like all the way to like the mining
Okay.
of
Wow.
of the materials. And so when they calculated like 14 kilograms for us, it's actually I've seen other estimates for other board games that are more like 5 kilograms or whatever. And so like this is really a gross overestimation, but it's being safe. But we actually like did do a few custom calculations to kind of see like how much of an impact does like the FSC do, and like how much does the having no plastic do. Having no plastic reduces the footprint by somewhere in between 2 and 10% of the overall footprint. And then it's kind of hard to figure out within that. And then the FSC certification, we actually went to the FSC website and like saw like, do they have any data on this? And I'll quote what they said. Basically, they say there's some evidence that FSC-based products have 30% higher carbon retention, but FSC is just initiating studies. So they don't even really know, but maybe it's like 30% better. So like that can start to give us like a sense of how we're making improvements.
Yeah.
But Cooler actually came up with this really cool chart for us. Let me share my screen really quickly.
Sure.
See my screen.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
They made all these graphs for us, and you can see we have like the top 5 contributors in our production, and you can see the breakdown with like electricity, transportation, waste components,
What is other?
So within that other, there's so that's like 28%. There's over 400 categories inside that pie chart, and the reason we just label it as other is because every single one of them is at 2% or less.
Oh, wow.
Actually, I think it might be 1% or less of the overall impact. And so, like, individually,
So it'd be
it's
like
exactly.
Okay. That's really interesting, though. Thank you for sharing this. I think it's so helpful to see a visual and then some numbers.
Definitely. You can even see, like, the breakdown of, like say, you have the CO2, you have, like, the nitrous oxide is 8%, the CH4 is methane, and then who knows what the other stuff is.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's very cool. No, that's super cool. So that's on your website, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I'm always learning more, and so this is really good to like get out there and like hear other solutions, because while the offsetting, you hear about that all the time, but it's like, well, are we planting like trees that are local to that region? Is it invasive? Is it going to just like take over?
Yeah, and again, it's really great to plant trees. Like we planted a tree for every backer in the first 48 hours on our Kickstarter. It's definitely like it's great to have more trees. It's just like not a rigorous way to do offsetting, really.
Now, I did just want to ask you specifically, what is your material for your game?
Yeah, so we searched for over a year for an eco-friendly manufacturer, and it was a pretty frustrating experience, to be honest. So I like reached out to well over 20 manufacturers, and like every single one that like could have like the hope of that for sure.
Yeah.
And we actually there were some pretty cool options, and they were all in Europe. And, well, one I'll actually specifically name just because I think they're really awesome is Ludofat.
Yeah.
They're in Germany, and they're I mean definitely the manufacturer I've seen that cares the most. And like they not only can they do like FSC materials and recycled materials, but they also like invest in renewable energy, and they try and like keep all their like materials sourced locally. So they're really cool. I definitely want to shout them out. The reason we couldn't use them or any of these other manufacturers in Europe is they are all booked up for well over a year. And for a first-time publisher, basically, I need to first raise the money on Kickstarter, and then wait for the money to come in, and only then can I put in an order. And so then it becomes like over a year after the Kickstarter that the game gets even printed, let alone shipped, and then you're looking at like even longer.
Yeah. I can see how that's intimidating for a first time designer, but I can
Yeah,
think of like multiple games that took like 2 years to fulfill or more, and it wasn't for sustainable reasons. I'm wondering,
definitely.
like, in the future, like, if people who are interested in seeing games made more sustainably, if part of that is waiting for the right manufacturer. Not that I'm saying you're making the wrong choice, but I'm just like, as far as like Kickstarter culture, people
Yeah,
are always like, "Oh, I've been waiting my game for 18
yeah,
months
yeah.
now."
Well, on top of that, for us, like I think we're in a pretty unique position where the actual game itself is going to have a way bigger positive climate impact than the manufacturing. Obviously, our game is like actually about climate change and so like help spread like awareness of these solutions, etc. But one of the things, I guess the last part of our subtitle, which is take action. So we basically, the idea is you can play the game, and after playing the game, you can pick your favorite solution and turn it into a real world climate project.
Yes, yeah.
Um, and that's actually so. First of all, it's not something we expect most players to do whatsoever. But the option is there if you're interested and if you happen to get inspired. But it is something we've actually seen already happen. So we sent the game to a school in Palm Beach, Florida, and they ended up flipping over they had two of their grade 6 classes play the game, and both classes ended up flipping over the reduced food waste card, which is actually one of the most shockingly impactful solutions. And
Wow.
both their classes independently decided to do class projects on reducing food waste.
Oh, that's
And actually,
amazing.
yeah, and actually, their local news station picked this up, and there's this amazing video of these kids dragging this like giant garbage bag of waste, like flopping it onto a scale. And so they actually managed to reduce their food waste by 3 to 10 kilograms a day. And the kids were like, this was just at the end of the last school year. I think this was in like March or something. And the kids were just like asking the teacher, like, "Are we doing this next year? Like, we can do better."
That's so
And
cool. So what I don't know if you know the specifics, like what did the kids do that was
yeah,
different?
so I think it was actually just like being aware of it. Like, it
Oh.
literally simply by just like starting to measure it and like realizing like now you have a goal and you have like a target that you want to like reduce it by. And then, well, instead of just like taking more food than you need and like then throwing it out, then you start to change your behavior there. I don't know if there's any other specific things they did actually, because there are a ton of like ways you can nudge
Right.
cafeterias to have less food waste. So, like, for example, eliminating lunch trays actually tends to dramatically reduce food waste because now you can carry less food, and so you tend to like carry less to your table than eat what's there, and then
Yeah.
you think of. So,
Such a
anyways,
simple solution to that. Okay.
yeah. So one of the things we're doing is actually we're working with Paul Hawken, and he's one of the co-founders of Drawdown, and they're developing a climate action platform. And so, let me see if I've some cards somewhere here. But basically, on the back of our cards, we have a QR code, and you can scan the QR code if you want more information on the solution, but also if you want to take action on it. And we're going to direct people to that platform so they can, um, so they can, yeah, take action and like
Yeah.
get inspired. Just that single school project for being done for a year coming out of the game already offsets at the very least 80 other games being manufactured. And so even it actually went well beyond that because the students actually presented to their faculty and inspired the faculty to bring back a school garden that they had gotten rid of previously to like build a soccer field, and they also like started a composting program based on that. So there's like
Oh
all
wow.
these effects that like just
Yeah.
playing this game had. So I think to answer your question, we felt it was really important to like get the game out there because every copy like it's gonna pay back for itself carbon wise, like no problem. But then that being said, we did actually end up just a week or so ago actually finding a sustainable manufacturer that might work. And it's something where we're super excited about. And I'll give you the name
Yeah,
because
tell me, because this is an eternal conversation going on with
yeah, well,
environmental gamers. Like, what manufacturer are you using?
yeah. So it's Long Pack Games, and so they've been really awesome, and they actually. So I reached out to them like a year ago in my like initial outreach, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can also talk about like some of the frustrations I've had trying to find
Please,
and
yeah, yeah. Like,
sure.
tell us the whole story, because this is, I mean, in a way, it's kind of groundbreaking that like more and more designers are trying to make eco-friendly games. People are interested to find out how to do it. So please share like what obstacles you ran into, and then how you came to Long Pack Games.
Yeah. So I mean the first obstacle is what I already said, which is that the European manufacturers are all booked up for over a year, which is not a problem if you're a big publisher because then like you don't need the Kickstarter. You know like you can just pay for the manufacturing in advance and you're fine. So I think that's a really great solution for the bigger publishers out there. But then for small publishers, really the only feasible option is China. One challenge there when talking about sustainability is language barrier. And as a first time publisher, it can kind of feel weird and I don't want to say intimidating, but you're worried like these manufacturers aren't going to take you seriously or they're going to like because you're a first time manufacturer or publisher with no credibility and ask like too many of the wrong questions, will they even want to work with you? You know,
Yeah.
so that's something I thought about, got around. It eventually started like actually asking the questions, and almost unfailingly, every manufacturer would be like, "Yes, so sustainable. Well, all our components are 100% sustainable," and like no other details whatsoever.
Yeah.
And so like what like for example, one of them I was like, oh like can you give more specifics please? And she was like, yes, all components are recycled material. And I know for a fact that the type of cards she was quoting me can't be recycled. And also there's like even if they could have been, like how do you know that? So I've actually like through the Kickstarter, I think like when you do a Kickstarter that's going well, all these manufacturers start like reaching out to you and like being like,
Oh, really?
hey, and like a lot of them would do that and reach out and be like, hey, you have an eco-friendly game, like you need eco materials, we can do that for you. And then you actually like what's eco about them? And just like,
Yeah.
yes, they are all eco. Or one of the manufacturers actually did offer an FSC certificate, but it did not have their company name on it. So I didn't even by that point that was just when I was finding Long Pack, and so if you actually go on the FSC website, you can verify any certificate, and so I just like took Long Pack certificate, like verified that it was real and on the website, and so I was pretty happy with that and didn't look into the other one,
Okay.
but yeah, it was like it, I don't want to say it was a fake certificate,
Yeah.
but it did look a lot
I'm
different.
curious, like when a company or when a manufacturer or
Yeah,
supplier is certified with FFC, um, if if a manufacturer was using another supplier and having like
yeah.
FFC used in their manufacturing, um, is that not
So
normal?
my understanding is that you can like anyone can use FSC certified materials because they can just like order them from an FSC certified supplier.
Okay.
But if you want to, as a game publisher, actually say my game is FSC certified and like put that logo on the box, then the actual manufacturer itself needs to be certified.
Gotcha.
And so it's not just their suppliers.
So that was the issue with that manufacturer, is they
Yeah.
themselves were not, although they were supplying an FFC product.
Yeah.
Itself was not.
Which, and I didn't verify if the FSC certificate was real or not. I have no idea. Definitely better to go with a manufacturer where the factory is actually certified.
Yeah. So Long Pack Games is an FFC certified manufacturer.
Yeah, so it turns out they just really recently got the certificate. So I guess
That's exciting.
Yeah, but it was also again a communication thing as well, because the first time I reached out to them, I talked to them. They like basically the normal response when I talked to a Chinese manufacturer about sustainability was either yes, we can do it, but like no further details, or it was just having no clue whatsoever. Now, I've had spoken to several contacts at manufacturers that literally just did not understand the English word recycling or FSC. And so, and it's not like, obviously there's a language barrier there, but like, if that's not in their vocabulary, then it's pretty tough to even like initiate that conversation, if that makes sense.
It does.
And so I actually had kind of a similar experience to that with Long Pack, but then I got a tip from Tommy at Pangaea Games, who did for us. He gave me his contact at Long Pack, and like they were on the ball with the sustainability stuff. So like, who knows? It might be that like at some of these other Chinese manufacturers, maybe like they did have options, but that particular representative just didn't understand. So of course, like you kind of hinted at, the FSC sustainable production is more expensive, and so it was actually significantly more expensive than we were hoping. So we've actually done a stretch goal through our Kickstarter campaign for it, and we've almost hit it. So at the moment we're, I think, like $2,000 or $3,000 away from it, and so if we hit that goal in the next few days, then we'll be able to go with Long Pack and do that, and otherwise we'll have to go with the previous manufacturer. We did like go into the campaign expecting not to have this option, so we're just like really happy like now this option has kind of presented itself.
Right. So yeah, give me a little rundown of like where we can find your Kickstarter, where we can stay updated on the things that you're working on, and if you have any projects in the future.
Definitely, yeah. So the Kickstarter is, I don't know when this episode is going live, but
I'm hoping to get it out like over the weekend. I don't know, because you're going to be finished on what is the date?
August 17th at 10 a.m.
Yeah.
Pacific time, which is 1 p.m. Eastern time, which I think is 7 p.m. Central European time. The website is solutionsthegame.com. I'm sure you'll have show notes. And then what was you asked about future projects?
Oh yeah, do you have any future projects? Like I don't know. And when I see this game and I see the impacts it had on kids in schools, I'm like, this is just screaming like, get this in all public schools.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, is there any do you know anyone in politics that could do that? Or
so we actually do have several partners, and two of them are in politics. So we're partnered with Green Pack in Canada and People's Plan in the UK, and they're kind of exploring ways to use the game as a starting point for political action.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, and so for example, People's Plan, they like host these events with local councils, and so they're exploring. We might do something a little custom version to like their for them. But yeah,
I'm a homeschooler. You might want to reach out to some different homeschooling websites to see if they start carrying your game and like, hey, let's teach about climate change. I think
Totally.
this is such an amazing opportunity to like give kids a real visual and like what is the most impactful and what you can do to change it.
It's a great idea, and I haven't looked into. I don't even know any homeschooling websites, so I guess
I'll
I'll.
send you some emails. I've been buying curriculum for the last month.
Yeah,
So.
I love it. And we do have a partner, Climate Science, that's developing a lesson plan for educators, and we do have kind of an educators edition on our Kickstarter that'll come with the lesson plan. And then if we hit some of our further stretch goals, we might actually do curriculums like a curriculum for like elementary and middle school, curriculum
Okay.
for high school, for university. But I'm not sure if we'll hit those goals or not. But it's definitely a great idea. Yeah, in terms of other projects, the it's a great question. I don't know. So what I'll say is, first of all, right now, all my energy is like focused on the Kickstarter in front of me, and like, well, afterwards, we'll kind of like take stock and like see the results and how we want to move forward. I do have like a list of maybe like 15ish games I'd love to make.
Oh, great.
Uh,
Okay. So we'll keep an eye on you and see what
yeah,
you come up with. I just wanted to wrap up, and if you could give advice to another designer that maybe it's not, environmental theme, but they just want to do one thing to lessen the harm on the environment in the creation of their game. What would your recommendation be?
there are design decisions you can make early on that, and honestly, these design decisions will make some of the biggest difference because if you're like choosing not to include certain components or to make the game block smaller, that's the actual absence of the emissions that would have been created otherwise. And so it's better than like any amount of sustainable manufacturing or whatever. But yeah, like I talked about having a smaller box size, but that can be hard to do because there is that price perception, and it's a decision we decide to make. But I also like understand if it's a decision that others don't want to make. The last thing I may say is like the, there's no need to like get so intensely wrapped up in it that it's like going to crush your project because like at the end of the day both board games are like it is a relatively really eco-friendly hobby. Don't spend so much energy on the little things that it will take away from the bigger things,
Mm,
if that makes sense. So like
yeah.
I wouldn't like freak out over the like shrink wrap, for example, because like
Okay.
it's great if you can find another option there. Like definitely do it, but if you like spend so much energy there that you could be doing something else, it's at the end of the day, it's like a thin wisp of plastic.
Yeah.
And so yeah, just do what you can, and but like really think about your sphere of influence, whether as a game designer or as a human in general, and like what can you do beyond just yourself, and like just actually,
Just do it.
yeah, just do it.
Yeah.
Uh,
I love that message. Just do what you can. And thank you so much for your time today and for talking with me.
exactly. Thank
And
you.
I wish you all the luck with the end of your Kickstarter. I just hope that we can rally around you and support you and get you to that publishing with Long Pack Games. So,
Amazing. Thank you
yep,
so much for having me, Joe. This
you're
has been a lot
welcome.
of thanks for pushing forward the conversation.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right, we'll see you later.
Bye bye.
Bye.